A long time ago, something very sad happened to Jane's family. Her Uncle Patrick found out from the police that her parents and sister were gone, but Jane was okay, just really scared and holding a shaver. Now, Jane is grown up and likes to take pictures of old houses, but she can't remember her family or what happened back then. She has a husband, Alan, and a daughter, Alice, but sometimes Jane forgets things, like when to pick Alice up from school. One day, Jane and Alice went to an old house, which was actually Jane's old home, but she didn't recognize it. She took lots of pictures because she felt drawn to it. While there, Alice found a toy and talked to someone invisible. Later, Jane asked about the house's records because she was curious. That night, someone left a box at their door with the toy Alice found and a bug, which surprised Jane. Jane found an old picture of a farmhouse she used to live in and couldn't stop looking at it. Because of this, she forgot to pick up her daughter, Alice, from school until her husband, Alan, reminded her. On her way, Jane thought she heard Alice's voice on the phone, asking her to come back to the farmhouse. Suddenly, Jane saw a blonde girl in the road, got distracted, and had a car accident. When Jane woke up in the hospital, she couldn't remember Alan or Alice. The doctor told Alan that the accident made Jane's memory problems worse. A psychiatrist named Liam said he could help Jane remember with special exercises, but it would take time. Later, Jane heard a noise and followed it, hoping to find the blonde girl, Susie, but she ran away. Then, Alan and Alice came to visit, and Jane was happy because she started to recognize them again. Jane, who is trying to remember her past, gets help from Liam, a psychiatrist. One night, she finds a box with a ballerina and a photo of her old farmhouse, which makes her very upset. At the same time, her husband, Alan, finds some papers outside their house. These papers show that the farmhouse is actually Jane's, and her Uncle Patrick has been looking after it. Jane doesn't remember having an uncle or asking for these papers, but she decides to visit the farmhouse to try and remember more about her past. When she calls Patrick, he is surprised but says she can visit anytime. Soon, Jane, Alan, and their daughter go to see Patrick in the farmhouse. Patrick says sorry to Jane for sending her to live with another family when she was young, but he thought it was best for her. He gives her the key to the farmhouse, but doesn't tell her much about what happened to her family there. Jane is thankful but still can't remember Patrick or her past very well. Jane and her family visit their old farmhouse, and Jane feels very nervous there. She goes outside and finds a red balloon with a key and a note saying, "Welcome home." Inside the house, Alan and their daughter, Alice, find Jane's old room and another room that used to be Jane's sister's. They discover an old music box and some toys, but accidentally lock the door behind them. The next day, they go to a nearby town. Jane visits an antique store and finds a newspaper article from 1985 that suggests she might have been involved in a family tragedy. Just then, Jane gets a call from Liam, her psychiatrist, who is supposed to be at his office, but Jane sees him in the store. Confused, Jane tries to follow Liam, ends up in a hay bale maze, and gets very anxious and lost. Jane leaves a maze by breaking through it and finds a box by her car. She opens it and sees a photo of herself as a child, her mom, and her sister Susie. At home, Alice wakes Jane up asking her to be quiet. Jane follows Alice and sees a memory of her mom and Susie. Suddenly, things get spooky. Jane sees Susie and her mom as ghosts, and Susie seems to be holding a tool. Jane gets really scared and runs around the house, trying to wake Alan, but he doesn't wake up. Susie, looking like a ghost, crawls from under the bed. Jane tries to hide, but Susie finds her. They struggle, but then Jane suddenly finds herself holding Alice, not Susie. Alice wakes Jane from a scary dream and tells her to go back to her room. Jane finds a toy on the floor and then talks to her Uncle Patrick for answers about the past. Patrick says he doesn't know what happened the day of the tragedy, only Jane does. The next morning, Alice says she's sorry for something that happened at night, but before Jane can learn more, she sends Alice and Alan to the lake. Jane feels the house is making her feel sick and plans to leave after they return. Alone, Jane goes into Susie's room with a key from a balloon and sees Susie heading to the barn. Jane follows and finds a fort with Susie's things and a warning from Susie about a monster. Jane tries to hide, but ends up running into a field. Jane finds an old shaver in a box outside, and Alice tells her dad about some strange dreams where an old lady warns her about Jane. But Alice is more scared of a monster in her room than her mom. The family starts to pack up to leave, and Jane notices Liam watching them from a distance. Suddenly, Jane hears Alice and runs after her, thinking she's going to the barn. But it's actually Susie, pretending to be Alice, who says they can't leave. Then, the real Alice shows up, and Jane gets so scared and confused that she accidentally grabs Alice too tightly. Alan comes just in time to stop Jane from hurting Alice. They find a knife stuck in their car tire and start arguing, but they stop when Alice screams for help from inside the house. Alice says a monster was chasing her, and then she has an asthma attack, which is new for her but reminds Jane of Susie's asthma attacks from the past. Alan tries to take Alice to the hospital, but can't open the door until Jane steps back, and then it opens by itself. Jane finds a note in the house that leads her to play a game. She finds a music box and learns a big secret about her family. Suddenly, she has to hide because her Uncle Patrick comes into the room. Liam, who Jane finds out is her dad, explains the scary truth about Patrick and what happened a long time ago. Jane had to hide and saw very scary things when she was little. Patrick and Jane's mom got into a fight, and sadly, her mom got hurt badly and couldn't survive, which Jane saw. This made Susie have a very bad asthma attack, but Patrick didn't help her. Instead, he chased Jane, who was trying to get away. Jane defended herself in the bathroom, and when she tried to escape, she accidentally caused an accident that hurt her and her dad, Liam, very badly. Because of this accident, Jane couldn't remember what happened. Patrick tried to make it look like Liam was to blame. Later, Jane was found by the police, very scared and hiding. In the present, Jane learns all this truth from Liam, who she now knows is her dad. She says sorry to her family's ghosts, and they go away. Alan returns and says Alice is okay but was left with Patrick, making Jane rush to protect her daughter. Patrick starts acting very scary towards Alice, even calling her by her sister's name, Susie, and tries to make her keep secrets. When Jane and Alan get back, Patrick takes Alice to a barn with a gun. Jane manages to sneak up on Patrick and stop him with a shovel. Then, she makes sure Patrick can't hurt anyone anymore by leaving him in her room for the ghosts to deal with. Jane remembers everything now and feels okay visiting where her family is remembered, leaving a photo there. It's like she's saying goodbye to the sad times so she can have a happier life with her family.